All right. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. Thank you for taking some time to spend with us and listen to this really awesome panel about QoE, QoS with online video. The title of the webinar, as you can see, is Optimizing Video Playback, How to Create Repeat Performances. I am Jason Thibault, the moderator. I am the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. You can find out more about our organization by our website, which is at the bottom, and unfortunately it is not .com, it is .org. Always find a typo on the slides after you publish them. But with that said, what I'd love to do is I'd love to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to let them do that themselves. So we'll start off with Olivier from Conviva. Olivier?
Hi, thanks, Jason. So I'm Olivier Wellman, and I'm a VP of Products here at Conviva.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about what Conviva does?
Oh, okay, the 60-second. Yeah, so Conviva is, QoE big data analytics organization. What we do is that we capture experience and engagement data for essentially any connected video viewing screen. We have a significant footprint today, something around 50 billion streams per year, more than 1,000 ISPs, and thousands of video player combination. And with all that data, we're able to, on behalf of publishers, we're able to analyze, monitor, and optimize internet connected screen with engaging video viewing experience. Conviva has today about 150 employees and blue chip customer. And what do we believe? What is the key? Content may be the most visible component of success for OTT, but you can't ignore the quality of the video for your OTT offering. And really the success at the end of the day is the combination of both the quality of the content and the quality of the experience. Some stats here, that have been in the industry for some time and that we've discovered on and on is 1% change in the quality of experience can decrease the viewing time by 60 minutes. Conviva, we're all about giving those tools, the multidimensional analytics and the big data platform, as well as ensuring that publishers have the means and the time to resolution to optimize their viewing experience.
Oh, very cool, very interesting. Let's move on to Kurt from IneoQuest.
Thanks, Jason. My name is Kurt Mickle. I run marketing here at IneoQuest Technologies. We're a company in Massachusetts. And since about the turn of the century, we've been focused on providing quality measurement of video. Started out with primarily IPTV video. And more recently, over the past, 5 to 6 years, we've been doing much more in streaming and OTT. I guess one of the things that makes us, that differentiates us is the idea that we look at quality metrics from the head end all the way down through the network and almost up to the endpoint. Within the last year, we have established a relationship with Conviva so that our systems can actually share metrics so that we can do causal analysis between our metrics so that when Conviva sees something happening, we have the ability to help them figure out what's causing the problem. And when we see something happening, say at the head end, we can kind of figure out how many people are going to be impacted by that. So you'll be hearing more about that over time. But what we're all about is video assurance, and we like to use the term operational intelligence, where we're basically deploying all kinds of technologies. It could be virtual software in the cloud. It could be appliances, and they can be deployed in head end. They can be deployed throughout the network, in the ISP network, before the ISP, in the CDN, or before the CDN. And basically with these tools and the ability to correlate all this information together, you can come up with a really nice comprehensive solution for understanding video, or gathering operational intelligence about your video. That provides the power, I think, that the industry needs to move from where it has been, sort of novelty and adolescence, into where it needs to go, which is, you know, into maturity and true, you know, long-term business.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Let's move on to Alberto.
Yeah, so hello, well, this is Alberto, and the VP of Product at Nicework. Nicework is a Barcelona-based company, although we have a global presence with offices in New York City. We've been growing quite a lot lately, so we passed so we're growing like twofold in the last, especially in the last 2 years. We're really an analytics and business intelligence company serving the media industry. So that means we have use cases covering pretty much everything in the media industry, from IPTV to OTT, and for all use cases in all departments. We are serving ad operations departments, we're serving audience departments, we're serving kind of loyalty, customer loyalty departments, content departments, content acquisition departments, so everything inside the media companies in general. What we're doing is really easy. So we are just capturing information, processing in real time, and putting it in an easy way for our customers to activate this information and make it easier for them to make decisions based on the data that we capture, right? So today is easy to capture data. I think the complicated thing that we're making easy for our customers is to make data accessible and readable in a way that they can make the right decisions. And of course, it's not about making right decisions. It's also about measuring A/B testing to get the proof of performance, which is always what you want to do, right? So getting data around that your decision is the best decision that you can take, either if it's for player configurations, CDN configurations, I don't know, like rendition or presentation configuration, or encoding configurations, live streaming, startup times. So there's a lot of metrics that we like to we make easier for customers to make decisions about.
All right, very cool. And then last but definitely not least, we have Brenton from Touchstream.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, Jason. Yes, hi, I'm Brenton now from Touchstream. I'm the CEO. We're a small Australian company, but we have a very global presence with offices in the US and Europe. We take a slightly different approach to monitoring. Most of the other guys here are more in-player solutions. We're actually a active synthetic monitoring solution. So we're making the calls that your video player would make, but we're making those 24/7. So we're actually kind of a bit of an early warning system. We're also more focused on the CDN than the last mile. In fact, we specifically exclude the last mile because the other guys do that so well. You know, where we're looking at is basically giving you visibility of exactly what your streams look like at the CDN endpoint. And what this does, it gives you early warning. So hopefully with our system, you can predict when problems are going to occur. And as I say, we're doing it 24/7, so no one needs to be watching the stream. It's just being monitored the whole time. And we also monitor a lot more depth than most. So we're monitoring every bit rate every minute. So you get a complete view of exactly what the stream is. So we're actually much more an operations tool. We sit in that operations group and basically firing alerts and, you know, big flashing red things when things are starting to go wrong, and basically jump on them as quickly as possible. So yeah, and our main sort of clients are the big pay TV and OTT platforms.
Fantastic. So, I mean, we've really got a rock star panel here of people who understand and live and breathe this quality of experience and quality of service around online video. So let's not waste any more time. Let's kick into the discussion. And the first question that I want to pose to you guys is really sort of high level. I want to start at the high level before we dive deeper into the details around QoE and QoS. But the question I have first is, how can we improve the quality of online video in general? Or is it good enough as it needs to be today? So what do you guys think about that?
I'll jump in, Jason. In terms of the quality and improvement, I think the very first component here is that it has to be a data-driven, iterative improvement. There is no single magic bullet in terms of improving the quality of online video. It's an iterative process over time where your infrastructure, your packaging, your encoding, your delivery network, your CDNs, your player, constantly improve. And we know, online video is a highly distributed, uncontrolled system, where there's, many ecosystem providers, compared to the traditional broadcast, cable and IPTV networks. So, that means that you cannot really architect a solution, tested and deploy, and then it kind of, works at a, similar, in a similar fashion over time. It is the only way is to use granular real-time data to systematically measure, benchmark, and improve the experience. But not only that, also be able to plug into the ecosystem, like the work we've done with IneoQuest and what Kurt was referring to, where you can go and diagnose an issue from the device all the way up into the network. So that's really in our view the way that you can really bring the quality of online video to the next step.
So Jason, I'd like to jump in. Olivia makes the solid point. In simple terms, it's really about, if you can't see something, if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. And each of the companies here represents different ways of doing measurement. And I would say in most cases we're offering up complementary ways of looking at OTT video distribution, because OTT video distribution is incredibly complex. And it's simply that complexity that drives the need for, measurement systems that can put it all together and give somebody a big picture. That need is even greater than it ever was in the managed network, broadcast traditional network scenario, where in fact they have very well-defined measurement systems and demarcation points and everything else. And we're just trying to help move the industry to a place where we can replicate the level of operational intelligence that's available, to people who are streaming today.
So that actually brings up a second. Does anyone else want to add to that before I move on?
Well, yeah, Alberto, I just wanted to touch on kind of the. I totally agree with what Olivier and Kurt said. So it's really about what we call the virtuous circle, and creating your own virtuous circle around, first of all, measuring. So if you don't measure, you cannot change anything, right? You don't understand anything. Second, just getting the insights about the measures that you got. And third is taking actions, and then measure again. And that's the only way of establishing the virtuous circle. And we need to think that the the overall environment in the internet, the overall environment is not built to deliver video. So we're trying to push a lot of video through a very suboptimal environment to transfer video. So HTTP was not built to deliver video, and the overall internet infrastructure was not built to deliver video. So we're always in that point where there's things that we can control, and there's things that we cannot control. So I think it's the great thing about establishing these conversations, and especially about the SBA in general, is that we're trying to put in place things to make this environment linear for video, which is not today, right? So we need to switch CDNs just because there's issues on the last mile We need to change CDN configurations because there's not enough, with these chunk size, we are suboptimally delivering to our end users. So I think it's all about measuring, and it's all about taking the actions, on having the ability to take the actions in real time to adapt our delivery to these suboptimal environments where customers do not suffer.
Oh, absolutely. And that sort of brings up a bigger question, right? Is consumers really want online video to act like traditional broadcast video. So they want to, sit down and kind of turn it on and have the same quality and the same experience. And so in thinking about that, what do you guys feel are the major hurdles for replicating broadcast quality in online video? I mean, what needs to happen technologically? What needs to happen so that there's a better experience with online video than there? It's similar to what people are viewing today on their broadcast television.
I'll jump in. This is what I look at here is, and I keep on hearing the benchmark is we got to get to broadcast quality. I actually think that OTT and the internet offers the ability to go beyond broadcast quality. And I think in some ways it already is, right? Getting 4K video and HDR content today, for the most part, that's only available to an OTT viewer. So I don't think we're talking about that when we're talking about quality. I think what we're talking about is, the startup times and the rebuffering issues and the pixelation, what resolution and what bit rate is required for all these different screens. And I think it also means that quality is different depending on the device that you're using. So if I'm watching something on a smart TV and I'm doing the lean back experience, that the quality there there's different expectations for me as a viewer than if I'm on my smartphone and I'm on a train on the way to work, and how that's going to behave. My expectations are different. Maybe I'm willing to tolerate a little bit of pixelation or whatever. But what I don't want is the video to keep stalling and making me wait. That's going to cause me to abandon. So that brings me to a key point here, which is defining what quality is. I mean, the industry has terms like QoS, quality of service, which is typically thought of as a performance metric for the way the network's behaving. And then there's QoE, which I actually wrote a paper about not too long ago about the worlds of broadcast, traditional broadcast, colliding with the worlds of OTT, because QoE, depending on who you're talking to, can mean completely different things. In the traditional broadcast model, QoE meant inspecting the content to make sure it was prepared properly, because the thought was once it goes into the pipe to get to the television at the other end, there's not a lot that's going to go wrong with the content. Then you hit the OTT side of things, and if I talk to my friends at Conviva or nice people at work, if I say QoE to them or their customers, that's all about, okay, so how was the playback experience? And, did the content look crisp? Did it start quickly? And was it not pixelated? So those are really very different things, but using the same term, QoE. So I think as an industry, and one of the things I think that the Streaming Video Alliance is here for is to help us all get to the place where we can sort of agree on, I don't know, simple things like definitions, and then actually drill down and look at the component elements that are underneath that are the building blocks for what quality really means.
All right. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I just want to say that, together with Kurt, it's true that quality, it's kind of the same level. I think even better in some cases with traditional broadcast, and I think it's the experience overall can be much better. And actually, I think consumers can be brought closer to advertisers, which will eventually attract more investment to OTT. But I think in terms of there's a lot of places where I think are a lot of key points where the overall OTT experience needs to get better. And especially in, I think, live experience. I don't want to listen how the people in the bar is shouting at the at the touchdown before I see it. So latency in live events is kind of a big issue for me. So I think that needs to get better in terms to match broadcast quality to online video quality of experience. I think there's also the ads experience, which is the advertisement experience in some devices is terrible. So it's terrible. So one player loads, the other one unloads, then the content comes. It's terrible experience. So I think that kind of the server-side and injection technologies are doing a lot of work there, but I think it needs to improve a little bit more. But I think in terms of last mile quality, in terms of pure network, I think it needs to get better as well. So ISPs and CDNs, I think there's a lot of work to do there, those problems with the last mile need to be fixed. And eventually, ISPs are investing in video, and we've seen the last moves in the industry where ISPs are getting more and more into the distribution itself and even in the content itself. So I think there's a serious strategy on improving the video delivery over networks. But I think it's one of the major struggles today. So I would say ad experience, live latency, and last mile quality of service.
I'd like to add to what Brennan and Kurt just mentioned here. I think we kind of digressed on that, but the importance and the difference between viewer experience metric and delivery performance metric. So the difference between QoE and QoS. QoE, is very much about what the viewer saw. What did he saw on his screen? How was his experience? While the QoS really measures the performance of delivery components. Both are critical. Both are critical, but it's important to understand the difference and apply those differences accordingly. In the Conviva view of the world is that you should probably it's kind of you have to balance between the two. You probably want to start with the QoE and metrics, and then go and look at QoS or measure the performance of delivery components that could affect QoE and vice versa. So I wanted to make that point clear, and I don't know if the rest of the panel agrees with me or not, but I think that's a very critical point. The second item, Jason, that's kind of related to your question is, at the end of the day, we want to, reach, the same quality as broadcast, but it cannot just be a replica of broadcast. There's the benefit of the internet, the benefit of, OTT delivery, the integration of video into social, the immediate feedback that you have, and the measurement components, the interaction that you can have with your video are very critical. So it's not just about matching the quality of broadcast, which is critical, but it's also leveraging what the IP can offer. Because if you really look at broadcast, broadcast has a constant reliability. And the video processing systems, they will look at artifacts, they look at video signals, which are important components. But when you look at video delivery over the internet, there are two main challenges here, which is the unpredictability of the internet and the fragmentation of device. Both of those are very difficult to overcome. There's an increasing number of devices, an increasing number of frameworks, and the way the events and the way the measurement is done has to be consistent and accurate across the board, and the resolution in order to mitigate issues or to solve root causes that may appear have to be on a playing field. You need to be able to address every device in the same way in order to optimize your experience across. And then the last point in terms of kind of challenges around the broadcast video, you need to be able to correlate and compare the data across the delivery chain. It's not good enough just to know what's going on at the endpoint, although it is a critical starting point, but you need to be able to bring that across the ecosystem from head-end viewing to smartphone, and then being able to create the trust in terms of the data accuracy in real time in order to optimize the service and the experience level. So, those are, some of the, points I wanted to make here that I believe are critical for us.
Okay.
This is Brenton here from Touchstream. I think the other thing to remember is that one of the big differences between the old broadcast style and the new OTT style is that in the broadcast days, you pretty much had control over everything. Whereas in OTT, you're outsourcing lots of different pieces of it, and that whole lot has got to work together. So you may even be outsourcing your encoding, to a cloud encoding provider, and then you'll be, obviously, of course, you have to have a CDN, and then there's, as the guys mentioned, the ISP. So all of these pieces have got to work together, and that's probably the biggest challenge in making it get close to that more consistent. When you just talk about the picture, more consistent thing is making sure that all of those pieces are working together, and that you're actually collaborating with all of those different providers. So we especially work, and I know the other guys on the call too as well, particularly with the CDNs, because without the CDN, it's going to be very difficult to get your content out as far and wide, and without working very closely together with them. And making sure that happens, it won't happen. You can't leave much to chance. But yes, it's the collaboration, I think, of making sure all the components work together, because there's so much more outsourced now.
No, that's very interesting. I mean, I like the idea that that the internet provides something more than broadcast. That's a really sort of eye-opening view and perspective for me, because I have long looked at things like broadcast quality as being something of replicating what's happening with broadcast television. So that's very interesting. And then talking about sort of these two components, you've got the player and you've got the server and you've got all these delivery elements and all these components that go into delivering a stream over the internet. And as Brenton just pointed out, a lot of these things are outsourced. Obviously that creates a lot of challenges to being able to even measure QoS and QE. And so maybe that's a great question to delve into, is what are some of the major hurdles to measuring quality for online video when you have the internet in your way, or a LTE network, or some other thing that you can't really control? What are the hurdles to really measuring quality of experience?
Well, I can give it a try. There's Alberto. I think, at least from our perspective, the major hurdles, and that has been around in the prior question, in the previous question.
Sure.
I think that the kind of the fragmentation of devices is one of the main issue here, right? So thinking that you need to build a plugin for every single device. You need to understand what's going on from the perspective of every single device and every single application on every single player ecosystem and environment. You need to test that. You need to obtain reliable data from this device, and it's not that the overall industry is not helping or not being built to be measured, but there's still a lot of players that don't take the third-party measurement into account when they build software. Meaning, it's really hard sometimes to get data from some players or from some advertisement plugins or even from some devices. So I think that will be, from our perspective at Nicework, the harder things to do, right? So getting the right information and consistently across all device base.
Okay.
So Jason, I would say there's actually two very fundamental but different challenges. One is technical, which all of us here are working to address. The second is really it's a business model challenge, because as in the last question we were discussing, the fact that now there are multiple vendors involved in the distribution of the content. Now that brings into question when the delivery doesn't work well, when something's not right, and we need to be able to measure it to try to figure out where the problem is. How do we get consistent measures from, you've got a CDN, or you might have multiple CDNs operating, and the CDNs might have multiple regions, and certain regions work better than others. You'll have different ISPs involved. You'll have potentially different encoding vendors, or your encoder vendor is in the cloud, or I could go on in terms of how OTT video is actually deployed. I don't think there is any one model. If I look at anybody's workflow, anybody's distribution model in OTT, they all look different. And that brings us to a place where how, as an industry, can we wrap our arms around things like, how do I know my CDN is performing well right now for New York City for an event? How do I know that my encoder that's doing this program is not creating issues that are affecting every viewer who's trying to watch this program? And maybe it's only because something in the encoder happened where the encoder got loaded a little bit more heavily, and it started impacting one stream versus another. And what that comes to is a business model question. It's not a technical question. We can all sit down and agree on how to measure things. And IneoQuest, we've been working for now about 5 years on deploying virtualized solutions so that you can put software in clouds, in data centers, and be able to measure things. Just give me the IP address and we'll go and we'll do the measurement. I know Brenton has solutions that do very similar things. He talks about synthetic testing. So it's not that. What it is now taking that information from all these different points and being able to put it all together so that a big picture emerges. And then what really needs to happen, and this is the business aspect of it, is that the guy who's collecting the revenue from the end customer, he's the one probably at most risk, right? Because if his customer gets upset and cancels the subscription, then that revenue, maybe that revenue goes somewhere else, I don't know, but it may not end up, with the downstream flow to the encoder vendor and the CDN provider and, the player vendor. And so if you can see the problem is one where the people who are responsible for doing things have to be transparently measurable in real time. And that's simply because in the old broadcast network, those things kind of existed. In that broadcast network, there were people who made sure all these pieces went together, they all flowed to a place, and people could understand it. They had to get beyond that silo or stovepipe model inside of the organization. And as an industry, we have to get beyond it across companies now. And that is a huge sort of business challenge. Again, it's something that I'm hoping that the Streaming Video Alliance can help us work through. So really, two, technical and business.
I'd like to add to that on some of what Alberto and Kurt were referring to. And yes, fragmentation of device, very critical challenge, very difficult challenge to overcome. And Jason, as you know, we've done a lot of work here, with the SVA around the QoE, and now with the CTA, and trying to, standardize some of those events that we can collect, so we can have better, accurate metrics across all those devices. So that's, a very critical aspect in order to ensure the industry really moves forward. There's a second aspect, which is, the importance of proper metrics, or, what I would call, metrics accuracy. There's a lot of metrics. Video stream, you have latency, loading, seeking time. You could have throughput with bitrate. You can have target speed with frame rate. different size, bitrate resolution, variable sizing, if you're looking at adaptive bitrate, and even like very subjective things, like audio and video quality. And so there's dozens and dozens of metrics that are required to understand video streaming performance. But what is the most critical here is to keep those metrics simple and actionable. You need to be able to, if the metrics indicates that something negative is happening, that you're able to find the root cause and you're able to take actions. Too much complexity is oftentimes, counterproductive. So, that's, not only we need to ensure, as an industry, ensure that, fragmentation of device and events and data accuracy is there, but that the metrics are accurate and are able to extract actionable insights into the data in real time. So, those are, two a very critical point that I see here in terms of metrics and the metrics dilemma.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just adding to that, what we've found, and I think Kurt hit on it early on, is that every workflow is different. There's no two implementations that I've ever seen that are the same. Sometimes not even similar. And so this always brings up an enormous amount of different issues. So you're not going to see the same issues at two different places, and so you have to build your software to actually identify what are the most common early warning signals, and that's why we try to look at single bitrate issues, because single bitrate issues tend to tell you that an encoder is slowing down or is struggling. So we capture a lot of detailed data, but we try to focus in on simple things. And this is, as Olivier was saying, you've got to keep it relatively simple so that you can see what the problems are, but having some depth of data behind that and looking for early warning signals. That's probably the thing that we focus on most is early warning signals.
So I see a thread in sort of the question that we just asked around this concept of metrics and this concept of, one of the technical challenges is, in a sense, could be capturing the right information, whether it's about delivery, whether it's about bit rate, but that leads to a question of what can be done with those metrics. So you start collecting this data, and what can you do with it? What can a content distributor or a content owner actually do with this data in order to make meaningful differences in the quality of experience that they're delivering to their viewers?
I think there's, if I can start on this one, I think there's really two big components there. There's the quality improvement and the audience engagement. The quality improvement, there's a lot of things that you can do with the data throughout the value chain in order to optimize the delivery, from encoding to CDN to the way your application has been developed. So throughout the value chain, you'll have key points, key focus area where the data can really help you optimize. That's the first one. And obviously on the audience engagement side of things, not only you can look at, because quality, is relative. Quality, you want to strike the right balance, because the more quality you want, obviously the more expensive it gets. So you want to strike the right balance there, and understand where is your optimal point. Where is your optimal point in terms of the quality that you want to give, the improvements that you're injecting within your workflow and your infrastructure, and how it impacts plays and the audience engagement with your content. So I think it's it's a combination. It's not a it's basically a combination of technology and operational process, where the data really helps you drive those operational improvements in order to deliver the level of quality that you want. which is that needs to be, and different providers have different level of quality. It really depends on the situation. It depends on what you want to do. It depends on your business objectives.
I like to think about this from two aspects. So when we start talking about video intelligence, we break it down into two pieces. We call it operational intelligence and experiential or behavioral intelligence. So operational intelligence is really all about the improvement of the delivery, which that can involve cost reduction. And I give, for an example, if somehow I can reduce the bit rate and still get the quality through some kind of compression technique or whatever, I can reduce the cost of delivery. Not only that, but with a lower bit rate, the probability of rebuffering is reduced. So that's a thought about operational. The experiential and behavioral intelligence is really more about sort of thinking about, I don't know, the people who are doing the content licensing. What kind of content are people engaging with? Like, let's go take a look at, types of content that are consistent or have consistent themes and see if that resonates with our viewership or not. Or maybe certain types of content works really well on one type of device versus another. Or, what are the engagement times? So those are two aspects. You look at those separately. You can say operational information here, experiential, behavioral information over here. But then, and this is where the real exciting big data challenge comes in, is when you start converging those things together. So for example, hey, what bit rate keeps engagement good enough on an iPhone or an iPad? And better than that, at what point does more bit rate not contribute anything, right? Because in our industry, we keep talking about, we have to have the best quality possible. No, what we need is good enough quality. The kind of quality that keeps viewers engaged, and not more. Because if it's more quality, if it's more bits, then it's going to require more bandwidth. It's going to increase the probability of rebuffering, not only for your stream, but for everybody else's, because we're all working through the same pipes. And so that's really what we see is, what do you do with the data? Well, pose a question and let's see. Because the trick is, once you have all that data and you pull it all together, the opportunities for new revenue creation and for technological improvements of your delivery system are immense. It starts with the data, though.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes left, and I've got one question that I want to save till the end, but we've got a couple of questions that our audience has sent in that I would like to see if you guys can address. The first question that we have is, can you talk about the quality of live linear video versus on-demand, and whether there are different challenges and solutions for each? And I would assume that would be for measuring or improving quality. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Brenton from Touchstream. There's some incredibly obvious differences between live and video on demand. Live is basically encoded, packaged, etc., all the way through the chain every second. So there is so many more things that can go wrong with live than VOD. VOD, typically you'll encode it, you'll run some quality tools against that Q&A and then put it up on the CDN, whereas live is happening live, as the name suggests. And so every piece of your chain has to be working 100% of the time. That's the biggest challenge with live. Being able to quickly pinpoint where in the delivery chain things have gone wrong, that's the big challenge for monitoring live. Yeah, I think everyone would probably agree with that. It's the basic bit of it.
Yeah,
I would just throw in one little piece here. There's probably a good reason why Netflix, which I would argue, they're held up as sort of a quality standard in OTT. There's probably a good reason why Netflix hasn't chose to jump into live. Now, there's probably a lot of different reasons,
Yes.
but one of them, I think, is probably from a technical point of view, and I bring this in. So I was with Akamai Technologies for a few years, and at Akamai, we would deliver these massive live events, and then what it took for our network to be able to do that was huge in terms of the scale, the massive scale for an event like a Super Bowl or an Olympics or that kind of thing. It took you off the charts. And so then Netflix comes along, right? They're doing the VOD and everything else. Eventually they decide, well, they're going to build their own CDN. Well, let me tell you, a CDN that you need for VOD looks nothing like a CDN that you need to distribute live content. The complexities, the scalability, all of those things are incredible. And so is there a big difference between live and linear or live and VOD? Man, it's huge. It's like two different businesses, effectively. Yeah. The other thing, and I think somebody touched upon this, was latency in the VOD world is kind of irrelevant. Latency in live has become this huge issue. And I think it was Olivier who talked about, he's hearing people cheering at the bar and being upset because they heard something first. Oh, sorry, Alberto. Yeah. That has become a really big deal. And the industry, I mean, if I was to look at a technology problem that the industry has right now, that's probably one of the biggest ones because, man, it's hard to replicate broadcast's ability, traditional broadcast ability to deliver content, through the pipes and do that with low latency. I'm very curious how that's going to turn out, but yeah, they're two completely different animals, and I agree, live is hugely complex.
Usually, yeah.
And in terms of behavioral data that we track in Nicework work from live to bot, it's completely different as well. So it's very, very interesting to see how different patterns apply to live and bot, and especially to live sports, where behavior is completely different to live news or any other programming at live. So people at live sports has a lot more kind of tolerance to failure than they have for live news or for a bot in general. But I think that the live thing in OTT, it's really a technological issue, a technological challenge, and it's going to be solved it's just a matter of time. So we know that there's like big players in the market like Akamai and others experimenting with new technologies, with sub-second segments, with WebRTC for live delivery, with multicast to unicast for live delivery. So I think eventually the objective of the overall industry is to get there, meaning matching and killing these latencies that make the live experience a bit worse, and listening how people cheers before you see the actual play. But I think it's just a technological issue that eventually is going to be solved.
Yeah.
I got a question on that for the panel, though. Something just hits my mind is the latency issue, if you were going to put two problems in relative position, is the live latency issue bigger or smaller than the rebuffering issue? Which one would you go after first?
I think the latency, Jason, I don't necessarily see the order like that, because I think in terms of live, scale and the ability to scale, and reducing the decision latency, that's what's very critical here. Because live, if you're doing a diagnostic of an issue and it comes way later and the show is over, then obviously you've missed the point. So it's about reducing the decision latency, including rebuffering or any or even granular types of rebuffering. Is it a connection-induced buffering? Is it a user-induced buffering? So it's about reducing the decision latency in real time. That's very critical in live, in my view.
Yeah. I mean, my view here is that latency will not make a decision for you whether to see the game or not. Whilst buffer ratio can make you just close the window or close the app or just get your Roku and throw it through the window. So I think it's really the two of them are really fundamental. I think what we are talking about here is about matching broadcast quality to online video quality, and here in that specific point, both are as important. So it is as important to have low latency delivery and live than it is to experience zero buffer in your OTT platform.
I would position this as, I've never heard the term latency rage, but I do know the term buffer rage.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my point, right? About throwing your Roku through a window.
Exactly.
No, I think that's a great point, and I think that what really for a content owner, nobody's going to be if you're going to watch a game, you've paid for it, a sports event, you already understand that a latency issue exists. It's going to annoy you a little bit, but it's not the thing that you're going to ask for your money back from or whatever. You went into it knowing it, or you subscribe to that platform knowing it. It is, as you say, the buffer rates. That's the thing that's going to get the Roku through the window and the people asking for their money back. So if you're looking at it from a commercial perspective, it's definitely the buffering.
So a follow-on question to this live and VOD discussion around, we got latency and things like that. What are there any differences in measuring the quality of a live stream versus a VOD stream, or is it really the same in terms of measurement?
I think that depends on where you're measuring. I mean, if I look down at the endpoints, it's going to look very similar. The closer I get to the head end, the closer I get to the place where the content is actually being produced, the more different it's going to look. So the big risk with live, and it's true for VOD too, but I mean it's file-based and the audiences aren't as large. But with a live transmission, anything that happens the further up in the distribution chain, it affects everything downstream, right? So you really have to be on top of your encoders. I mean, for file-based, right, you've already published the content. There's no encoder involved in the delivery of the content. For live, you have the encoders, you have ad insertion, you have potentially regional captioning, languages, right? Late binding audio. You've got dozens of things that are all being done in real time together in a very complicated dance. And every time you touch that content, you risk adding problems. Just, decode it, do something to it, re-encode it, you just added risk. And so you really have to measure at each stage in that pipe what the expected good value should be. And as soon as it varies just a hair, man, you better be on top of it. Not only that, but you need to have a redundant, origin services capability. So if you're coming from the live event, you really should have two feeds. And those two feeds should be using two different technologies. And those feeds should come into potentially two different physical locations. And you should encode and do everything else, and then get to the place where once you're onboarding to your CDN or your multiple CDNs, you've got two separate streams that are coming in there, and you can switch from one stream to the other if you have a failure anywhere. It's a completely different story.
And the scale of things also change, because typically live means a larger audience as well than a standard on demand. So the scale of the platform and being able to react very quickly is critical, especially for live.
With a few minor exceptions like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, with a few minor. But typically live, I mean, television remains, TV and the live event is, you have this emotional binding, social aspect to it, which we see being reproduced on the internet as well.
Oh yeah, live events, sports, emotion, rage. The potential for rage in sports is very high.
All right, I've got one last question to sort of wrap this panel up, and you guys have been fantastic. It's a really great discussion. I call this sort of my around the horn 5-second answer question. So I'm going to go in order again of people on the slides, but what I want to ask you is, where do you think we will be in 5 years with regards to online video quality of experience or quality of service? Where will we be? Will it be better, worse? You know, we'll have solved all the problems. Give me your answer in 5 seconds if you can. Go, Olivier.
So I think in 5 years from now, you know, we'll have reached the same quality as broadcast while leveraging the benefits of the internet. That said, you know, bandwidth and resolution is a never-ending problem. You know, 360 video, 6 degrees of freedom, 4K, 8K. So the need for quality of experience and metrics remain, because in my view, it's very much an iterative process where, despite the the improvement in the infrastructure, in the tools, and in the way you can diagnose, there is a never-ending aspiration from viewers to do even better over time.
All right, go, Kurt.
All right, you know what I think is, I think it's all about the monetization potential. So if we keep seeing viewers moving, you know, from traditional into OTT, I think the revenue potential increases, the need for QoE and QoS monitoring increases, and I think that's what's going to make the difference between this, you know, OTT being a novelty versus it being completely mature in the future. And if we actually look at this, like the software industry went through this, right? Early software was, you know, a little hacky, and you could, you know, fix it and do whatever, and they thought of quality as something that you did at the end. And you know, we'll see that changing over time, I think, as people understand, and the money that's coming into OTT continues to grow with the eyeballs.
Yep. All right, Alberto.
Yeah, so I think my view is that OTT is going to provide a much better experience in 5 years than broadcast. So I think I can, you know, I see like this declining of the broadcast consumption in favor of OTT. I think we've seen that in the 5 years from now. I think in 5 years more, we're going to see that just completely changing from, you know, I think we're not going to talk in 5 years. We're not going to talk about quality of experience. I think all the automations will be in place. We're not going to talk about this topic anymore. It will be given for granted.
All right, Brenton.
Yeah, well, yeah, just from Alberto's, it will be given for granted, and that will, but it doesn't mean the problem goes away. It'll be harder to do because it'll be more complex. It'll be so much more will be delivered over mobile networks. So we're going to get much more involved in helping the telcos deliver that, and it's going to be LTE broadcast and all those fabulous things that are going to make it. But it's going to make it harder. And I think there's probably going to be consolidation of into some platforms as well. So I think there's too many different ways of doing things with too many different variables. So there's going to be. I just looked at people like MLB or BAMTech, where basically a lot of people depend on these big platform providers to do all that delivery because it's going to be harder. It's going to be much harder, and you're going to have to monitor more things than now, not less.
Fantastic. Well, we are out of time, so I wanted to say thank you to our awesome panelists who could take time out of their day to come and discuss with us about quality of experience and measurement and all these things about online video. And obviously want to say thanks to all of our participants and attendees who could take time out of their day to come listen to our discussion. Again, this is brought to you by the Streaming Video Alliance. And everyone, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.